Welcome to Crypto English 101.
Ah, yeah.
It's the show that takes you
Well,
from crypto zero to crypto hero.
I like that.
I'm Laura,
I'm Ethan.
and we are diving deep,
Yeah.
deep into the world of Bitcoin today.
Deep, deep, deep.
Going right back to the source. You know, we talk about this paper all the time.
Right.
It's Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system by mysterious
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Nakamoto.
It's a bit of a dense read,
It is.
but that's why you've got us to break it down.
That's right.
So before we really get into the nuts and bolts of it,
Right.
what was Satoshi trying to solve? What was the problem that this whole system was designed to address?
I think the most interesting thing is that when you read this paper,
Uh-huh.
it almost feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Yeah.
Because it really nails a problem that we still deal with today,
Right.
which is that, online commerce.
The way we buy and sell things online
Right.
relies so heavily on these financial institutions.
These middlemen.
These middlemen, these trusted third parties,
Right. The banks.
The banks.
The credit card companies.
Credit card companies, exactly. And that's fine.
Right.
It works. But Satoshi saw some real weaknesses in that system.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really like cash, is it?
Right.
Like when I hand over a $10 bill, that's it. It's done.
Yeah, there's no, oh, can I reverse that?
Right.
There's no, can I go back and get my $10 back?
Yeah.
Like, once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
But online, it's not like that.
Mm.
And Satoshi was like, how can we make it more like that?
So what are those weaknesses then in the online system?
Well, for one, those online payments, they're not truly final, right? Like you said, if something goes wrong, if there's a dispute,
Right.
someone needs to step in.
Yeah.
And that someone is usually one of those big institutions.
Right. And it costs money.
It does cost money. There are fees, processing fees, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that can be a real barrier, especially for those
Small transactions.
tiny, tiny, tiny transactions.
Yeah.
Think about micropayments, things like that.
Right.
If you're paying $1 for something online and there's a 50-cent transaction fee, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then there's the whole issue of reversibility, the fact that those payments can be reversed.
Yeah.
So merchants, they have to be extra careful. They need more information from you.
Yeah.
They have to put up with a certain amount of fraud. And, it's a hassle.
It's just messy.
It's messy. It's clunky.
Yeah.
And Satoshi saw that.
Right.
And they said, look, with physical cash, you hand it over, transactions done.
Right.
No middleman.
Yeah.
No need for all this trust.
Yeah.
Can we do that online? That's the big question.
So what was the answer then?
The answer, the big idea, was to move away from trust and move towards cryptographic proof.
Yeah.
To create a system where you didn't have to trust a bank or a credit card company,
Right.
but you could trust the math,
Right.
trust the code.
Yeah. Trust the system itself.
Exactly. The system itself.
So instead of trust the institution, it's trust the code.
That's a great way to put it. And that led to this idea of an electronic payment system where people could directly transact with each other.
Peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer, cutting out the middleman,
Right.
cutting out the fees,
Yeah.
cutting out the hassle.
So how do you actually do that? Like, how
Right.
do you build a system based on cryptographic proof?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because the first thing you have to figure out is how to solve
Double spending.
the double spending problem.
Right. You mentioned it earlier.
Right.
But for our listeners who may not be familiar, what is double spending and why is it such a big deal?
So think about a digital file, like a song or a picture. You can copy it easily, right?
Yeah.
Make as many copies as you want.
Right.
Now imagine if you could do that with digital money. You could just copy your coins and spend them over and over again.
Right.
That's double spending.
That would be a problem.
It would be a huge problem.
Yeah.
Because it would break the whole system.
Right.
So the question is, how do you prevent that?
Right.
How do you make sure someone can't spend the same digital coin twice?
Right. Because with physical cash, you can't do that.
Exactly. You hand over a $10 bill, it's gone. You can't hand over that same $10 bill to someone else.
Right.
But in the digital world, that's a real challenge.
Yeah.
And one way people tried to solve it before was with a central authority, or like a digital mint that would keep track of all the coins and verify every transaction.
So like a digital bank almost.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
But Satoshi saw that as just going back to the old system.
Right. Back to trusting an institution.
Back to trusting an institution.
Yeah.
And all the problems that come with that.
Right. It's the single point of failure.
Exactly.
Potential for corruption.
All of that. So they came up with something much more radical,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So instead of a central authority, imagine a network of computers, all connected,
Uh-huh.
and they all agree on the order in which transactions happen.
Okay.
And they do this by creating computational proof
Uh-huh.
that a transaction happened at a specific time.
So it's like a giant public digital ledger
It is, yeah.
that everyone can see and verify.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And because it's distributed,
Uh-huh.
no single entity controls it.
Right.
It's much more resistant to censorship or manipulation.
Okay, so this timestamp server, it basically creates a timeline of transactions.
Yes, and that timeline makes double spending almost impossible.
Okay, I see how that works. Because if everyone can see that I spent a particular Bitcoin at a specific time, then I can't try to spend it again later.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It's like having a receipt for every transaction
Right.
permanently recorded in this public ledger.
That everyone can see.
Everyone can see it.
Okay, so how does this distributed timestamp server actually work?
So let's talk about how Bitcoin transactions actually happen.
Okay.
Think of an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures.
Okay.
Each time a coin is transferred,
Huh.
the new owner adds their digital signature to the chain.
So each signature represents a transfer of ownership.
Exactly. And each signature is linked to the previous one,
Uh-huh.
creating a chain that you can trace all the way back to the beginning.
Okay, so like a genealogy of the coin.
Yeah, I like that genealogy.
Yeah.
So if you receive a Bitcoin,
Mhm.
you can check the chain of signatures,
Right.
make sure it's legitimate,
Uh-huh.
and that the person sending it to you actually owned it.
So it's like a digital title history.
Exactly. You can independently verify that the coin has a valid history.
Okay, but how does this prevent double spending?
So the chain of signatures is important,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the timestamp server that really seals the deal
Okay.
because it proves when each transaction happened.
Right.
So here's how it works.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a bunch of recent transactions all bundled together.
Okay.
This is called a block.
Okay.
The timestamp server takes this block
Uh-huh.
and it creates a unique fingerprint of it, a hash.
Okay.
And this hash is then broadcast to the entire network.
Like publish publicly?
Exactly, like a public announcement.
Okay.
So everyone knows that this block of transactions existed at that specific time.
Right.
And here's the key. Each timestamp also includes the hash of the previous timestamp.
Okay, so they're linked together.
They're linked together in a chain.
Okay.
So if
Oh.
you try to change a timestamp,
Uh-huh.
you have to change all the timestamps after it.
Right, because each one is dependent on the one before it.
Exactly.
So it becomes practically impossible to tamper with the history of transactions.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's like a tamper-proof record of everything that's happened.
Okay, so this timestamp server, this chain of blocks, it solves the double spending problem.
Right.
But who's actually running it? You said it's distributed,
Right.
so there's no central server.
That's the beauty of it.
Okay, so how does it work without a central authority?
The answer is proof of work.
Okay, you mentioned that before.
Right.
What exactly is proof of work?
It's basically a way to make it really, really hard
Uh-huh,
to create a new block,
uh-huh.
but very easy to verify that it's correct.
Okay.
So imagine a complex puzzle.
Uh-huh.
To add a new block to the chain,
Right.
you have to solve this puzzle.
Okay.
And the puzzle is all about finding a specific piece of data called a nonce
Okay.
that, when combined with the block data and hashed,
Uh-huh.
produces a hash that starts with a certain number of 0 bits.
Okay. And finding this nonce, it requires a lot of computational power.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like trying a ton of different combinations
Right.
until you find the right one.
Okay, so it's computationally expensive.
Very expensive.
Right.
But once you find the right knots,
Uh-huh.
it's very easy for anyone to check that it's correct.
Okay, so that's how you verify the block.
Exactly.
So in a way, this proof of work, it's like a digital version of mining.
That's a great analogy.
You're expending energy resources
Right.
to find something valuable.
And something valuable is a new block in the chain.
Right.
And the reward for finding that block
Uh-huh.
is new Bitcoins.
Okay, so that's the incentive for people to run these nodes, to
Right.
do this computational work.
It is. It's like a reward for keeping the network secure and running smoothly.
Right, so it's not just about altruism.
No, there's a real economic incentive built into the system.
Okay. And are there any other incentives besides these newly created coins?
Yes, there are also transaction fees.
Okay, what are those?
So when you make a Bitcoin transaction,
Oh.
you can optionally include a small fee.
Okay.
And that fee goes to the miner who includes your transaction in their block.
So it's like a tip for the miner.
Yeah, kind
Oh.
of. And these fees can actually become a big part of the incentive over time.
Right, especially as the number of new Bitcoins being created decreases.
Exactly. The paper even suggests that eventually transaction fees could become the main incentive,
Okay.
making the system completely inflation-free.
Interesting. So the incentive structure is designed to keep the network running smoothly.
That's right. It encourages people to participate
Uh-huh.
and to act honestly.
Okay. But how does this honesty thing work?
Well, imagine you're a miner,
Mm-hmm.
and you somehow manage to control a majority of the network's computing power.
Okay, so you have a lot of power.
A lot of power.
Right.
You could try to double spend coins
Mhm.
or manipulate the system.
Right.
But here's the thing. Doing that would undermine the value of Bitcoin
Right.
and your own holdings.
It would devalue the whole system.
Exactly. So it's actually in your best interest to play by the rules,
Right.
mine new coins honestly, and collect those transaction fees.
Because that's how you maximize your own profits.
Precisely. The system is designed to incentivize honesty.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's clever, isn't it?
It is. Now, what about regular users who just want to use Bitcoin? Do they need to run a full node
Right.
with the entire blockchain history?
No, they don't. The paper talks about something called Simplified Payment Verification, or SPV.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, it's a way for users to verify payments without having to download the entire blockchain.
Okay, that makes sense because the blockchain can be pretty big, right?
It is, yeah. Gigabytes and gigabytes of data.
Yeah.
So with SPV,
Mhm.
you just need a copy of the block headers.
Okay.
And those are much smaller.
Right.
They're like little summaries of each block.
Okay.
And then, to verify a transaction,
Uh-huh.
you can request a Merkle branch.
Okay, what's a Merkle branch?
It's basically a proof that your transaction is included in a specific block.
Okay.
So you don't need to see all the other transactions in that block.
Right.
Just a proof that yours is in there.
So it's like a receipt that says your transaction is in this block.
Exactly. It's like a digital receipt.
Okay, so that's how SPV works.
It's a way to make Bitcoin more accessible to everyday users
Right.
because you don't need a super powerful computer or a kind of storage space.
So SPV is more efficient,
Uh,
but is it as secure as running a full node?
well, it's secure as long as the majority of the network's computing power is controlled by honest nodes.
Okay.
But if a malicious actor gains control of a large portion of the network,
Right.
SPV users could be more vulnerable to certain attacks.
Okay, so it's not as foolproof.
It's not as foolproof, no.
But it's still pretty good for most everyday users.
It is.
Now, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But it's really amazing how this one paper laid the foundation for this whole world of cryptocurrencies.
It really did. It's like the blueprint for the whole thing.
Yeah. So for our listeners, let's just recap the key takeaways.
Sure.
Satoshi identified the problems with traditional online payments, right?
Right.
The reliance on trusted intermediaries, the lack of true finality,
Right.
the fees, the fraud,
All of that.
and their solution was to move away from trust and towards cryptographic proof.
That's right.
They created a peer-to-peer network where transactions are verified through this proof-of-work system
Exactly.
and recorded in this public tamper-proof ledger called the blockchain.
The blockchain.
And the whole system is incentivized to keep it secure and running smoothly.
It's a really ingenious system.
It is, and it's changed the world in a lot of ways.
It has.
So for our listeners, here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
If a system like this can work for money, what else could it work for?
That's a great question.
What other areas of our lives could be decentralized, made more secure and transparent,
Right.
using these same principles?
It's something to think about.
It is.
It's a whole new way of thinking about trust and value.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin.
It's been fun.
We'll see you next time on Crypto English 101.
See you then.